Amateurs jump straight into grading, pro colorists pause. We first read the image, the emotion, the exposure, the cameraman's intent. Once I understand all this, then I start grading. This is where every grade truly begins. Most skip this page, but for me, this is like reading the cameraman's mind. I look at the ISO first. It tells me how the cinematographer wanted to balance light and texture. Here, ISO 400 means he protected the luminance and aimed for a cleaner mid-tone roll-off. Next, the color temperature is set to 5600 Kelvin, but the image still looks cool because the blue tone represents that the atmospheric light itself is a cooler tone. And the cinematographer wants that obviously because it's a cold winter scene. And a slight push towards magenta for a warmer skin tone, which separates the foreground color from the background. Then I study the midpoint and roll-off. This shows how much contrast range the sensor captured. It's like reading the dynamic depth of emotion in the frame. Once I understand all this, then I start grading. Because at that point, I'm not just coloring footage, I'm finishing what the cinematographer started. So now we understand the cinematographer's vision for this particular scene. The first focus is on maintaining minimal luminance levels. The second is on preserving natural skin tones for separation and originality. And finally, ensuring the overall tone remains blue without making the image look overly cold or overcast. Let's begin with the first node, where I adjusted the pivot and contrast along with a mild increase in global saturation to create a balanced starting point. Now, on the second node, I noticed an overly dominant blue cast to bring each color back to its natural position. I adjusted the offset wheel slightly toward the skin tone to achieve better balance. Even though the image is already well balanced, I felt it could benefit from a slightly improved dynamic range to add a subtle contrast pop without affecting the colors. So I applied a luma, only contrast to give the image a bit more punch. Now we can see a slight shift in tint from blue to green in the areas of the snow. But the vector scope shows no signs of the mild green tone. So to check more clearly, I simply enabled the 2x bullseye view in the scope, and it was there. In earlier versions like 14 or 15, we had more ways to turn the snow back to blue. But since this is DaVinci Resolve 20, I'm going to use the magic mask tool to get it done easily. Open the magic mask and make sure the node is enabled. Drag the playhead back to the start. I've already selected the subject along the edge of her shape to create a perfect mask, and it works really well in Resolve 20. Alright, let me track forward. Once the tracking is completed, I'm going to invert the mask to remove her because I need to change the tint only in the snow. On the primary wheel, I just made temperature and tint adjustments. Temperature to add a cooler tone and tint to remove the greenish cast. We can see the changes in the before and after. And now we've satisfied the cinematographer's vision. Now, I'd like to take a closer look at her face and see what I've done. Can you see that blue tint on her face highlights? That's a win-win. We've just justified the atmospheric reflection on the subject's face. Cool, I've completed about 90% of the look. I'd like to take a closer look at her skin tone again, and I'm thinking that whenever we're exposed to cold winter conditions, our blood flows faster to keep the body warm, which brings a magenta or reddish hue to the epidermis, especially in fair-skinned people. I'd like to replicate that effect. To do that, I went into the color slice tab and adjusted the skin and red hues to appear thicker. In simple terms, I increased the density to achieve that rich, blood textured effect. That looks exactly how I imagined it. Let's take a closer look. This is before and this is after. That's clean. And the final node is film grain. I just added a 35mm regular film grain. I don't think you guys can see the difference on YouTube, so let me try zooming in. I can definitely see it. Let me know in the comments if you do. Now, let's watch an overall before and after. Hit subscribe if you'd like to see more value-added DaVinci Resolve tutorials.